Hello and welcome to Mountain Climbers. Thanks for joining us today. I am so looking forward to you all hearing Shanae Cruse's story. So, my sister and Shanae met in Tennessee about a year and a half ago, and they quickly became good friends. And it was evident from the start that Shanae had this incredible story. And it's a topic that we haven't covered on Mountain Climbers yet. And I love exploring issues that we haven't explored on this show. And that's true for Shanae's story. And it's no secret that this country is absolutely sports crazed. Athletes make outrageous salaries and they're idolized by young and old alike. And Shanae was well on her way to becoming that kind of athlete. She was at the top of her game, nothing could stop her, and college scouts were pursuing her. And then one devastating night, she lived the nightmare that no athlete wants to live. But God was faithful, and He sustained her in the midst of unattained dreams. So she's going to join me now via Zoom, and I know that the wisdom and the lessons she learned in the midst of tragedy will help you and encourage you when unforeseen circumstances come your way to look to the more that God has for you. Hey, Shanae, welcome to Mountain Climbers. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me, Whitney.
You're so welcome. So, I love any time that I can have a guest on that shares a story or a topic that we haven't explored yet. And
Yeah.
we haven't explored your personal story yet or anything similar on Mountain Climbers. And I'm excited because, as you know, this country is sports crazed. They
Yeah.
idolize their favorite athletes, and grown men cry at football games when their team wins. And so I just think your perspective on this is going to be so refreshing that while it's fun and okay to enjoy sports, it's not in game. It's not shouldn't be our whole focus.
Right.
So thank you for your willingness, to share your story. And first, I just want our viewers to know a little bit about you. Uh, where are you from? I know you live in the great volunteer state, but have you
Ooh.
always lived there?
Right. So I originally was from Illinois.
Okay.
I was born in a very small town called Pekin and lived in Peoria. But myself, my sister, and my three brothers, we moved here
Okay.
um, when I was 7.
Okay.
So I'm 21 or 21, I wish. 21, 29 now. And yeah, I love Tennessee. I've lived here forever, so I kind of consider myself a Tennessee girl.
Yeah. It's like your home state. When people ask where you're from, you probably don't even think about Illinois. You say
Right.
Tennessee. That's cool. And I think for your stories, I know it personally, and I'm excited for everyone to hear. I think your salvation story just kind of laid the foundation for you to overcome the hurt and the tragedy that you've been through. And so I just kind of want you to share that to set that foundation for everyone watching.
Yes, that's my favorite part. So, at the young age of 7, we started going to a church here in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I just knew that I wanted to ask Jesus into my heart,
Yeah.
and I did, and I was baptized in a not heated, nice pool, but a cold lake, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
ever since, he just protected me, and I just had such a passion for him. And so my salvation is really what um, just kept me focused, even when there's hard times with single parent and um, maybe just growing up less than wealthy.
mm-hmm.
Sports and God were everything for me.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned sports. So when did you know that you had this superb athletic ability?
Um, I think knowing that I was superb didn't happen until like 8th grade, but I knew that I wanted to play The first time, I know this is silly, but it was Space Jam, the movie.
Oh, I love
I think
Space
I watched it when I was like 5,
Jam. Okay.
and just something about it. The very first dream I ever had was that I wanted to be the first woman in the NBA to play with Michael Jordan. So I
Oh,
didn't want to be a girl and play with the girls. I wanted to play with the guys.
yeah.
And so that was my first passion. I started playing, rec league.
Yeah.
And then when we moved here to Tennessee, I think people just recognized that I was very tall.
Okay.
I'm 5'7" now, but then I was even like 5'5". I've not grown much. So I
Yeah.
was pretty large. So basketball came easy. And then into middle school,
Mhm.
realizing that I would just get to play all the time and and I would
Yeah.
start to be on the varsity, I began to realize that I was a pretty good player.
Yeah. So it was always basketball for you. You didn't dabble in other sports. It was.
No, I mean, I was an athlete and I love to lift weights. So I
Yeah.
would, do a bit of weightlifting. And one time, a coach would try to get me to play track. And so I would try that, but
Mhm.
nothing got me excited the way basketball did. So I just put everything I had and every bit of time I had into basketball.
That definitely makes sense. And I know what. Well, first of all, I'm going to ask, what position did you play?
Good question. I played what some people will call posts or
Okay.
center. So that's a position of 4 or 5. And those are just the typically bigger, taller people that play below, down low on the blocks next to the goal. Because most of my life I was the taller girl.
Yeah.
When I got into high school, playing against people that are 6'3", 6'4", I realized it wasn't going to work. And so I started to step out and shoot threes, which would be a wing.
So like you sunk it pretty much every time.
Yes,
Uh,
I wish. So I loved playing post. It's a bit of a physical part of basketball,
yeah.
but you just figure out how to work it. And then I did love to shoot out, like step out and shoot.
Mhm.
And also in AAU is a little more competitive. So I would have to play against people, like I said, that are 6'1", 6'2". And so it just was easier for me to step out and shoot a
Yeah.
three than it would be trying to figure out how to get around a 6'3" player being
Yeah.
5'7".
That makes sense. And speaking of AAU, did you participate in that because you wanted to be the best of the best? You wanted to be as good as you could, above everyone else. Was that the purpose of traveling with AAU?
Yes. So to kind of take it a step back, because I think I missed a big part of really where some passion came from was 8th grade year. We were playing against a team,
Mhm.
um, and here we call them the Spartans, but so happened Pat Summit's son played for them. And I just, I never thought I'd get googly eyed over
Girl
anything,
moment.
but I did. And I just wanted to go sit with her. And so I did. And we just got to talking, and she just began to tell me um, words of affirmation of being good because I had nothing to compare that to. And at that point, we're playing middle school. And so there's not really any talk about college or anything like that. So I think that just made me really realize that someone like Pat Summit telling me that I was a good player
Mhm.
excited me.
Yeah.
And so then into high school, that pursuit of D1 school, Division One, it's basically top college schools,
Okay.
um, started to kind of just recognize me, and having recruits from D1 schools or Pat Summit
Yeah.
come out and want to talk to you and pursue you,
Hmm.
it became a big thing. And so everyone just kind of knew in sports that if you wanted to be competitive, if you wanted to up your game, that you had to play AAU. And so that's what I did.
Yeah.
When I wasn't playing for high school or middle school, I was playing AAU year round.
Yeah. That definitely makes sense. And would you say that basketball became your whole life? Nothing else mattered but the game.
It did. And not to maybe to simplify it, I believe my mother did a great job, and I believe that she pushed me as well as she knew she could.
Yeah.
But I believe the mentality coming from a household where your parents didn't go to college, so not really knowing how to direct you in that, and then also being a family that's poor,
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that I was ever told was that basketball was my ticket.
Yeah.
And so I believed that. I didn't push myself academically because I believed that my only talent was basketball. So very early, I identified as Shanae, the basketball player, not Shanae the Christian, not Shanae the friend or the sister. Basketball was everything. And so I ate, slept,
Mm-hmm.
worked, played basketball, even days off on Saturdays. I even got a key to our high school gym, and I would just go and practice all day because I just knew that that's all I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so slowly and surely, sports were more important than Sunday nights at church or Wednesday nights. I needed to practice.
Yeah.
And so basketball was absolutely everything to me. And it also didn't help to come from a small town
Mm-hmm.
where
Yeah.
basketball is everything.
Yes.
And when you're good at it, maybe people tend to give you some slack
Yeah.
when you have a D or an F when you really shouldn't be playing, or if you want to skip out on class, people kind of afford you luxuries just because you're a good basketball player.
That happens everywhere, I think. And I just to go off topic just a little bit, because something you said I think really needs to be highlighted. It is huge, the words that you pour into children, into teenagers, because that forms them, and that in those are the impressionable years, like, and so like what they hear is what they believe. And
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, people need to take that to heart, because I know you personally, and I know, like, like, I don't know you as Shanae, the basketball player. I know you as Shanae, which we'll get to it, later, with all these incredible talents and just such a sincere heart to serve God. So I think that's definitely need to, point that out. It's very important, the words that you pour into, kids and teenagers, because that could set them, off for the course that, for life. And so yeah, so thank you for pointing that out. But like, as you said, you ate, you breathed, you slept, basketball, everything was basketball, and you were well on your way to making a name for yourself. Like you said, college scouts were, pursuing you. The Pat Summit was, after you. And, you touched on this a little bit, but I want you to dive deeper. How did it feel to know that a legendary name in college basketball wanted you to play for her team?
It felt really good because, as I had mentioned, basketball was just really what I was naturally good at. I didn't have to try, I was just good. And
Yeah.
it only helped that I also had the drive to practice. So,
Yeah.
matching talent with hard work,
Mm-hmm.
I was just really good.
Yeah.
And studying in school never really came easy. I had certain things that I was okay in, English, writing, but certain things I struggled with. And not having someone to kind of push you and say,
Mm-hmm.
this is more important than practicing basketball, I just kind of let that go. And so I didn't feel like at the time I was very smart. So knowing that basketball, I was so good, and then knowing that my coaches believed in me, but then someone in college and Pat Summit alone to tell me that I was worthy,
Yeah.
um, it just did something to me. It flipped a switch, and at that point, I felt like this is my ticket. This is what is going to get me out of poverty, where I don't have to live like my parents. Although they tried their best,
Yeah.
you always want better. And
Yeah.
so I wanted better. And once I knew that I had that affirmation from someone like her, um, that was it for me.
Yeah.
And all I could see was college and was basketball, and eventually, playing professionally and playing overseas. That's just all I wanted. And so I completely identified with that.
Yeah.
Her telling me I was good almost just solidified um, that's what I needed to do for the rest of my life, was play basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so because of that, um, I just dove even deeper, and that's all I wanted to do. And unfortunately, looking back, I did get what some people call a big head, although I do have a big head, but figuratively speaking, I got a big head. I mean, down to the point where I would sign autographs and tell people, like, I'd be famous one day, you better keep this. Like my best friend Rachel at the time, I said, you better keep this, I'm going to be famous. And I just, I became a person that you see now that I wouldn't like,
Yeah.
because I just thought that I was the best.
Mm-hmm. And like I believe some of that's natural, like it makes you feel good when someone believes in you and tells you that you will make it. And so I know, like, it, in your mind it might have gone a little too far, but it's, you're human. And I mean, I know, like, if I don't know, like Lori Wick or Karen Kingsbury, told me like, you're a great writer, Whitney, I'd be like, I'm gonna make it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I totally get it. And and like you said, you were well on your way to making a name, to be that hot shot, big basketball star that you wanted to be.
Yes.
But then you lived the nightmare that no athlete wants to live. Just tell us about that devastating night.
Yes. So thankfully, I was blessed to not have really any injuries my career of basketball. I may have stubbed a toe or a finger, but nothing ever broken, no surgeries, nothing. And so I believe I was at my peak. This is sophomore year, and I just couldn't get enough. I played on 4 teams. I don't even know how I did that.
Yeah.
And some nights I would play 4 games a night back to back and just couldn't get enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so my traveling team went to Furman.
Okay.
We were just playing a league that weekend, and it was our first game. And I was just on fire. I was making every shot, I was playing the right plays, and it could not have gotten better. And I just felt the highest I had ever felt in a game. That's how well it was going.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, um, I was down court on my own, no one even near me. And I just happened to slide to the left and I fell. Something popped, and I just laid there thinking, you have to get up. This is where pride kicks in, because I said, you have to get up. Don't lay there and flounder around and whine. So I tried to get up and I couldn't, which was weird.
Yeah.
So my coaches came over, and at this point, I'm not sure what happened. I didn't know if it was my knee or my ankle, but a trainer was trying to figure it out, and she placed her hand on my knee, didn't push, but placed her hand, and it was excruciating.
Oh.
So then I knew.
Yeah.
So they helped me up, and I was able to bear weight, and I walked over to the bench and I sat there and we iced, and I sat there and I just kept thinking, well, I probably just, popped my kneecap out or something.
Yeah.
But it just got worse. And as the night went on, I was in so much pain. Um, and I still didn't want to recognize something was wrong.
Yeah.
And I've always been stubborn that way. I just thought, get up, it'll be fine. And it just continued to get worse. And this tournament, my mom wasn't at. So a parent called her, and she came overnight and picked me up. And that next morning, we were back in Oak Ridge, and we went to a doctor, and they took an MRI. And I still just kept thinking, like, they better not tell me I can't play this next weekend, because I'm going to play.
Yeah.
And then the MRI came back and they told me that I tore my ACL, and I just couldn't believe it.
Mm,
Um, I think everyone somehow knows playing basketball what an ACL is, because any other part of the body at that point in age I wouldn't have known,
yeah,
but I knew what that meant.
yeah.
And it was a shock. I don't think it sunk in
Hmm.
for a long time. And I couldn't understand because I could walk.
Yeah.
Um, I could even jog and it stopped hurting. But they told me if I ever wanted to play basketball again, I would have to have it repaired.
Hmm.
And so that started a very long journey of recovery.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where I realized my identity was in the wrong things and I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
So before the ACL tear, I was just a Christian that loved basketball.
Yeah.
After my ACL tear, not being able to go to practices or play games and
Mm,
have people constantly tell me I'm so good and me getting excited about that, I was at home
yeah.
um, looking at a 6 month recovery
Hmm.
in a lot of pain where maybe one friend would come visit me. And it really made me open my eyes about who I identified in and what I identified in. Um, and back then it was devastating. It was completely devastating because I put all of my worth into something that was taken away in an instant. Um, but fast forward, a blessing in disguise, which I didn't know at that point. God used that to completely change the trajectory to where I could see what He had in store for me and not what I thought I had
Yeah.
in store for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, that's amazing. And just let's go back a little bit to, you got the news that you tore your ACL, and you mentioned that you were devastated. But did anger, depression, did all that set in before you realized, okay, I'm not identifying in the right things. I don't know who Shanae is in God. Were you did all those emotions, do you have to process that, like anger, depression, sad, like all that before you kind of test?
Yeah, I think I process emotions in a late way,
Mhm.
anyways.
Yeah.
So then I was still being very stubborn and just knew that even though the doctors told me it was going to be 6 months, that I was going to somehow be healed in 3.
Yeah.
So that was my goal. I was making sure that I was doing physical therapy
Hmm.
double the amount they told me I should have,
Yeah.
having my brothers help me at home. It just didn't set in that nothing was ever going to be the same. I just always thought I was going to bounce back because that was always my mentality.
Hmm.
And so at that point, I still just kept burying the fact that that's all I cared about. I would try to dismiss that people didn't come by just because they were busy. I would give them those excuses and those reasons. And so it didn't hit me until well after, this is sophomore year. Um, it's sad to say, but it did not hit me until senior year in high school that I realized I was depressed. I was sad. I had no idea who I was. I actually ended up moving high school. So it's a whole new set of people. I'm no longer the basketball star. I'm actually getting water for people on the basketball team just to be a part. And that really made me question, what have you been doing and why? So that's when everything really sunk in, is when I was a senior in high school.
Now, were you told, like you said, like in your mind, you would bounce back, you would play basketball, you had surgery, you had physical therapy. Were you eventually told that you would not have a career in basketball?
No one told me that. And matter of fact, I still tried to pursue basketball. I quit playing AAU, but I would go and support my friends. And a coach who was familiar with me from playing,
Yeah.
who was actually the coach of the best AAU team you could be a part of, that you can't even try out for, but have to be asked to join. he saw me in the stands one day and he came and asked me and said, "Why aren't you playing anymore?"
Yeah.
And so that reignited the passion again that I still could do this.
Yeah.
And so I started to play for that team again. I was released from physical therapy and I thought, okay, this is it. I'm ready. Unfortunately, very quickly in that game, I realized that I couldn't move the way that I used to. My knee was swelling up like the size of my head. It was painful. But again, being stubborn,
Yeah.
I wouldn't quit. My coach had to pull me out and he says, "You look like you're in pain." And
Yeah.
I said, I'm fine. Just let me play. So I continued. And then also I would travel, no longer being recruited by D1 schools.
Mhm.
Now we're down to D3, which is still great, right? Still an opportunity for college, just less opportunity for scholarships. So I was still visiting, and I'll never forget, I was at Maryville College
Mhm.
visiting, um, thinking that was my last shot.
Mhm.
And we were talking to the recruiter, and it literally just clicked in my head that no, this isn't right. Like, I began to think of the future and what that held for me. Painful basketball games where my knee was swollen for a week after,
Yeah.
um, playing professionally, to then what,
Yeah.
So at that moment, I then knew, okay, what else is going on here? And then God began to pull me a little closer and a little closer. I think I fought that because I was depressed and I was angry, because that's all I was. I was just this fit basketball player. And now I'm not a basketball player who at the time thought I wasn't very smart and didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
So I didn't give up. Um, and no one told me I couldn't until that day when I went to Maryville College and I told my mom, I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love about you, Shanae, is that you did something that a lot of athletes who have aspirations to be, big stars, and they have those like freak accidents and they can't pursue their dreams. You did something that not every athlete would do, and you let God shift your focus, and you let him teach you that basketball wasn't everything, that while like we said, it's okay to enjoy sports. It's not in game, it's not what our focus should be in, it's not what our identity or our idol should be in. And so you're not this big basketball star today, but what I love about God is that he orchestrates all of the details, and he gives us the more when our dreams fall apart, and he gives us beauty from ashes. And he certainly did that for you. And like we said, you're not playing professionally, but you are having eternal impacts right now. And I would just love for you to share about your ministry, how you work with the teens at your church, Faith Promise.
Yes. So the good stuff. God slowly and surely started to pull me to him.
Mhm.
And I was hesitant and I think I was angry for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, who else better to blame than him instead of myself? So I did that for a bit. And then, after college, he just continued. And I said, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
And so I started to have the biggest, spiritual growth I'd ever had, and really began to know who Christ was and who I was in him.
Mhm.
And after a while of trying to fill that void of basketball with other things besides him, like boys
Mhm.
or hanging out and partying with my friends because I'm young, I began to realize it was him all along. And so he led me deeper down, this path, and I ended up back at my home church.
Okay.
And I just said, okay, God, I want to be all in. What does that look like? And so, I wanted to become a member. I wanted to tithe. I wanted to be in a small group. And so, a part of being a member, you also needed to serve. And I said, okay, well, we'll serve with students. I'm not too old yet, and I can hang out with kids. So this is okay. So, I went, I completed my training, my 6-week training, and I will never forget my first time to be able to actually go in with the students.
Mhm.
I said, oh no, 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 no. I
Mhm.
went to the pastor and I said, do you know a lot of them were talking and texting? I said, I can't do this. And he said, now listen, because I'm old school. You
Yeah.
know, I would go to church where you wouldn't dare talk while the pastor's talking, but there's different times. And so my pastor helped me to understand that we need to be the examples
Mhm.
and set the culture, be the culture that we want to see, and not just expect someone else to do it. And so
Advice.
from that point, I was all in
Yeah.
and I began to serve in different areas.
Mhm.
But this was the biggest one for me. Wednesday nights, having a group of high school girls
Mhm.
that I just got to pour into, not just on Wednesday nights, but we did live together,
Yeah.
still do live together.
Mhm.
And becoming a part of that ministry just helped me realize that, just like you said earlier, that kids really do need direction. And sometimes their parents can do all that they can do, but they really need others. And sports or anything else, it could be boys, it could be
Mhm.
substance, it could be anything, but they need someone to tell them what God tells them that they are
Mhm.
and not what the world does. And there's not enough of that. And so I found my place there
Mhm.
um, to hopefully help and let God use me so that someone didn't go down the same path that I went down. Although I learned so many things from basketball, and I truly believe that sports really help fully mold someone. You learn responsibility, discipline, structure, teamwork. But those things were tools that God wanted me to only use for what He had for me and not have it all.
Yeah.
And so those tools helped me.
Yeah.
Um, and Wednesday nights and serving God and helping others has been life changing for me.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And like everything that we experience, it isn't in vain, doesn't go void. God will use it even if, um, that path doesn't go like it should.
Yeah.
He'll take what you learn from that and use it for what he has for you. And that's the cool thing
Yeah.
about God. And, you know, I would say, this is just me, I think you pouring into teenagers and having an impact on their lives has fulfilled you in ways that a big career in basketball could never have done. And so I just want to think about this for a minute. Let's say you never had that injury and you kept playing basketball. You went on and played for Pat Summit. You became this big basketball star. You played professionally. You got to play with Michael Jordan, like you with let's say like that all that happened. Do you think you would be where you are right now?
No. I believe that God would have still um, worked in my life. But I do believe that we can hinder
Mm-hmm.
what He has for us by being stubborn and trying to pave our own way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I I can't imagine who I would have been. I still, loved people and had a serving heart and all of those things, but it just wasn't what God had for me. And I was blinded by it and I couldn't see that.
Yeah.
I couldn't see it at all because it's so easy for us, right? We're made up of two things, flesh and spirit.
Yeah.
And people tend to pour into the flesh. And so the world told me to run after the flesh. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not what God has for me. And so the spirit told me something completely different. And so that void I had, I think that all of us eventually at some point had, I kept trying to fill with affirmations of fleshly things, worldly things.
Yeah.
And now I don't ever have to worry. My joy is deep rooted in Christ. No matter where He takes me, or what happens, um, I'm okay and I have joy and I have peace and it's wonderful because those blinders dropped. You could tell the shift. You really could. You can see it. And I think that I just want so badly
Mhm.
um, for others to see that. It doesn't have to be sports, it could be anything, but sports. Truly, I don't believe that anyone in my life ever thought that they were leading me down the wrong path. You know, people bent over backwards to help me
Yeah.
practice at all hours of the night
Mhm.
or take me to
Yeah.
AAU, and it wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
People did a lot for me,
Mhm.
um, and I believe they were doing the best that they could to help me succeed in life.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with that. The problem was God wasn't number one, and He has to be. And
Yes.
anytime He's not,
Mhm.
those things will perish. And so I would hate to even imagine if I hadn't torn my ACL, where would I be right now? What would I have done to my own life instead of listening to God?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love what you said, how we're made of two things, flesh and spirit. And that's so true. The Bible says, test the spirits and, see what they say. And, above all, our answer has to be peace. And, again, I'm going to go off a little bit because I love what you said. And I think you can, shine a light on this fact so much and affirm what I'm trying to say, how imperative it is for ourselves. Like, it doesn't hurt God, for ourselves and for others, that we choose God's perfect will and not his permissive will. Wouldn't you say that? Wouldn't you agree with
Yes, that's good. And of course, because you're so eloquent, you're the writer, you're great. The way you said that was perfect.
that? I
Yes,
thought how you said it was perfect. So,
I would absolutely agree because as you said, there typically you wouldn't think anyone in your life is trying to lead you down the wrong path or be malice.
yeah.
Um, but it happens, and I think we just have to recenter ourselves and remember. It's what I tell my kids on Wednesday nights. I went from being a leader
Yeah.
to being a coach to being a senior coach, and what those things means is just higher responsibility. Instead of focusing on 8, now I get to focus over hundreds, and just pour into them. And you can see what sports means. You can see what guys mean to girls or what girls mean to guys. You can see it.
Mhm.
And we just need to remember that God has to come first. My pastor has always said something, and he says, if your kids have to ask you if you're going to church this Sunday or this Wednesday, there's a problem. They should always know that
Mhm.
they're going, and it's not because there's a practice that they can't miss or there's a game that's happening. It
Mhm.
should never be a question.
Yeah.
And so I think that's always stuck with me
Mhm.
as well. And so we just have to remember, I want to remember
Yeah.
that I have a purpose, and my purpose is for God. And for me personally,
Mhm.
my calling to ministry has become that. I'm sure God calls them differently.
Mhm.
And it could be through sports. There's
Yeah.
a big platform for a
Yeah.
lot of people in sports.
Mhm.
But for me, I just had to be reminded that God was my foundation and my number one, and not basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's evident that, he did. He got through. I love seeing what you're doing. I've been to Faith Promise a couple of times, and I've gotten kind of to step back and see you interact a little bit with some of your teens. And the way they respond to you, it's like evident that that's your purpose. That's like why you were put on this earth, is to invest into the youth. And it's corny, but it's true. The children are our future, and and we have to invest in them, and we have to show them the right way. And the Bible says, "Train up a child the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart in that." And I just think it's so cool that you get to do that, and it'll be so amazing. When you get to heaven and you get to see like all the kids that you invested in. Oh my goodness. And it'll be so cool. I think it'll be so awesome. But just to kind of, end it here, there's a lot of teens that are kind of where you were when you were a teenager. And they have these aspirations of being this big athlete and going the distance, playing professionally, and, first, getting that scholarship for college like you wanted to. And um, you know, they they might, experience what you did, where it's all taken away from them. And it's crushing. They're
Yeah.
human. It's crushing when you think your life is going to go one way and then unforeseen circumstances just snatch it away. So I would love for you to be a voice of hope and encourage them that, when and if that happens, that they need to get past it because God has something above and beyond and so much more for them.
Yes. And again, I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Sometimes I think we forget that our lives are a story and hope for others, and we should share those. So, what I would say to anybody, just to clarify, that sports is a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it can be a great platform for us to share and to witness, but it needs to not be the platform. So make sure that God is at the center and that it's not a question if you're going to go to church or love Him.
Yeah.
And if we identify in being the daughter and the son of Christ, then sports and everything else is just extra. See, what I couldn't see and what others couldn't see is that God's bigger than all of that. So, although I was poor and my parents couldn't afford college,
Mm-hmm.
God was bigger than that. So, although I thought my sports was the only thing that was going to get me through college, God knew more.
Yeah.
And so I was able to be educated and come out of college only owing $1,500 in debt. That's a blessing. It's something I would have never known.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what type of affirmation that was for me when I got my acceptance letter to the college of my dreams,
Yeah.
MTSU, I couldn't believe it. And it's because I needed to focus on God and that I wasn't stupid and I could study it. I just had to have those blinders off. And so people just need to not give up. If there is an injury, that's not all who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And your story matters and it could help someone else who's going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're a testament to that, because you sharing your story tonight is going to help so many people. And I know that you said that, when you were growing up, you didn't think you were smart, but I'm here to tell you that you are so wise and God's just given you a gift to just, pour into people. And I love hearing your story. I knew it, but I didn't know it all. And I love seeing, you know, where you were and how God just did this miraculous work in your life and you allowed Him to use you. And above all, your story shows this truth. When your strength comes from the right source, there's not a mountain you can't climb.